Okay, well, welcome to Introduction to Water Monitoring. Um, I'm Eric Adden of the Sno-King Watershed Council, and you've met also Rachel with Whale Scout. Rachel is working on becoming a water quality trainer with us, and so she's going to participate and chime in as she has items to contribute to our class this evening. And that's even a picture of Whale Scout right there doing water quality monitoring training. So our agenda is we're going to go over, we've already done introductions. We're going to talk about the course series, talk about water, watersheds and streams, land use and water pollution, laws and regulations, water monitoring, data to action strategies, and becoming a streamkeeper, and then questions and discussion. And I would say that anytime during the class, feel free to just come off mute if you have a question or something you want to bring up for discussion. Do that and we can just discuss it right then when it comes up. Okay, so we did talk about introductions a little bit, but I guess I didn't really ask you sort of do you have a particular connection that drew you to this, or what's your connection to water?
So with us here at Cascadia, we're really interested in our wetlands that we have on campus. And that really looks into the North Creek, because that goes down into our, like sort of passes by our wetlands. And that's where our wetlands drain into. And so we're involved with that. And I like water and swimming.
That's great.
Um, yeah, I obviously working with Whale Scout, involved in all things correlated with marine animals and their health. And obviously water has a big part of that. Right now, one of the areas that we're working in is the Formula One golf course. And that's where I'm taking a lot of samples monthly. And since we've been doing a lot of restoration there, wanting to see the change over time, of what changes from our riparian restoration has on our water quality data for long periods of time, and able to actually use that for not only just for us and our own understanding of the work that we do and the connection that we make and the difference that we're also implementing, but also able to then report that into grant work, and then being able to replicate that, not just at the Formula One golf course, but other restoration sites in the future. So.
Very cool. How about you, man? What drew you to working in water?
My connection to water. So back when I was working at the Department of Transportation in Washington State, I used to do like environmental permitting. So I fill out the joint permit applications to get the permits for Section 404 and Section 401 water quality certification from the Department of Ecology and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. And then I also applied for the Section 402 construction stormwater general permits. So if we have like more than an acre of ground disturbance, we are required to apply for that permit.
Okay, kind of a regulatory connection. And then I'll tell you, my personal connection is that I live on a creek in Kenmore called Little Swamp Creek. And the picture there is of Little Swamp Creek. And it's very infrequent, but we have seen on occasion a salmon come up Little Swamp Creek. So that's kind of my personal connection. So I'm with Sno-King Watershed Council. We're an all volunteer nonprofit that's been around since 2008. Got some primary programs. One is Sno-King Water Watchers, which is our community-based water monitoring program. And we also have a Swamp Creek habitat restoration program. I'm working on a couple different sites in Kenmore, and we work with many partners. One of our primary partners in terms of developing this training and implementing this training is Global Water Watch, and they're based out of Auburn University. They've got kind of nodes that operate in different locations around the world. We're considered to be sort of a node of Global Water Watch. So they've come up with the curriculum. There's some manuals, which actually occurs to me I should probably send you the manuals if I haven't already sent you the manuals. Basically, they've come up with the training methodology and the monitoring methodology that we use. And so we're working under their quality assurance plan for how we deliver this training and how we conduct the water monitoring. We also partner with the Adopt a Stream Foundation, and I'm actually now working as a co-director of the Adopt a Stream Foundation. Adopt a Stream has been around since 1985, and our mission is teaching people to be stewards of their watersheds. Some of the materials from this evening's course I've drawn from some reference materials, the Streamkeeper's Field Guide from Adopt a Stream. So I mentioned we're partnering with Global Water Watch, and they've developed a model for community-based water monitoring, which is what we're implementing. This is kind of the outline of their model, which is connect people with some simple technology, use a consistent approach for monitoring, generate credible data, then use that knowledge to take action in different ways, and ultimately work on watershed quality and watershed stewardship and quality of life. The Streamkeeper's Field Guide is a reference that I recommend. It also, at a very holistic level, and also at a very detailed practical level, talks about the issues that we're discussing. And it teaches people how to be a streamkeeper. And Tom Murdoch is one of the authors, and he's actually still at Adopt a Stream. So you can come by there and actually meet Tom. So just an overview of how we present this course. We have introduction to water monitoring, physical and chemical monitoring, bacteria monitoring, stream biomonitoring. We also teach BIBI, benthic index of biotic integrity, stream flow and habitat assessment. And the sequence that we're going to be going over just in the next few weeks, we're just going to cover the first 3 of those, intro to water monitoring, physical, chemical, and bacteria monitoring. And the other ones we'll typically schedule later in the summer or fall. And for each of those, I will send you a written reference, as well as we'll go through the practical class. So we pretty much all are versed in how important water is. Fresh water is an especially limited resource. There's a statistic on how much of the water on the planet is actually fresh water, and it's just a tiny, tiny fraction of the water that's on the planet. Some of this is going to be reviewed for you guys, so I'll probably go through it a little quickly, but some people don't know. A lot of people actually don't know what a watershed is or how watersheds work. So it's an area of land that drains to a common point. And so it's, boundaries are the watershed divides. On one side, the water goes into one watershed. The other side, it flows into a different watershed. The way that it works is rain falls in the landscape, collects based on the shape of the land, and everybody's in a watershed. They also exist on different scales. And so this is, for instance, the Salish Sea watershed boundary, which is one of our important local major watersheds. And watersheds can be defined on different scales with different boundaries. So within each watershed, there's sub-watersheds. The state of Washington, for instance, is divided into what they call water resource inventory areas. So right now we're in water resource inventory area 8, referred to as RIA 8. It's the Lake Washington Cedar Sammamish watershed. And to the north of us, you can see RIA 7, south is RIA 9. And those boundaries are used as a basis for interlocal agreements for funding to be directed towards salmon recovery work. This is my local watershed. I'm in the Swamp Creek watershed, which is a sub-watershed to the RIA 8 watershed. And down at the bottom of the diagram where you can see Little Swamp Creek, I'm in a sub-watershed of Swamp Creek. There's different resources where you can get information on watersheds. So USGS and EPA are some places to get resources. There's state resources like the Department of Ecology. And there's also at a state level, there's Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife has something called Salmonscape, which is a great resource on fish in rivers. And also at the county level and city level, you can search on the county or city websites and find information about the local watersheds. Some ways that you can do your own individual research on a watershed would be, one is take what's called a stream walk, which is basically to get familiar with the stream that you're concerned about from, either in your immediate vicinity or from one end to the other. And another thing is to look for what's happening on the landscape that could affect your watershed. We're going to talk about some concepts related to watersheds. So one thing is what's called the hydrologic cycle. And this is essentially the process by which water gets recycled through different places in the environment. And we're going to watch just a short video that talks about the hydrologic cycle.
The water cycle, nature's recycling system. The sun's energy warms the water. Water becomes water vapor and enters the atmosphere, where it forms clouds. The clouds carried by winds release condensed water back to the Earth's surface as precipitation, which accumulates on the surface and as snowpack in the mountains. Small amounts of water held by plants, animals, automobiles, and buildings are evaporated back into the atmosphere. Most of the water that returns to the Earth's surface as precipitation will infiltrate the soil, percolating into underground aquifers or running off the surface into bodies of water. Smaller amounts are drawn up by plants, transpire through leaves, and evaporate back into the atmosphere. We cannot control the hydrologic cycle, and the water supply is fixed, so water must be conserved and properly managed. When it rains, each drop of water hits the earth like a small bomb, loosening particles of soil which flow into waterways as sediment. Riparian buffers, living barriers of tree and brush, can prevent sediment and pollutants from entering waterways. Contour strip cropping, ribbons of vegetation between row crops, prevents water erosion from taking topsoil. Crop residue left on fields also helps prevent erosion. It lessens the impact of falling rain and holds topsoil on the land. Cities and built-up areas where land is largely covered by pavement prevent water from soaking into the soil. In these areas, water runs off in high velocity through storm drains and sewers, carrying pollutants into the water system. As the Earth's population grows, the demand for water will grow with it. Sound management of water will be key to maintaining a safe, abundant water supply. USDA, NRCS, helping people help the land.
So all those cows moving must be because it's the USDA video. Any questions on what we've gone over so far? Okay. So the next concept I'm going to talk about is what's called the river continuum. And so this is a kind of an important concept about how rivers and streams change in their characteristics from the headwaters to the mouth. And that can be in a number of different kind of characteristics. So one is like, is it a stream that flows year round? Or if it's one that is just comes and goes, it might be called ephemeral or intermittent. If it flows year round, it would be a perennial stream. There's a concept of stream order. So as you have a first order stream, just has no tributaries to it, then as two first order streams come together, they form a second order stream and so on. That's mainly just a way of referring to streams. So if you're looking at a stream and you're saying it's a second or a third or a fourth order stream, it essentially means you're farther downstream in the river continuum. The channel profile and width is also something that typically changes between the headwater and the mouth. So when you're closer to the headwaters, it's a more of like a, maybe say a V-shaped channel. So it's more deep and narrow, relatively speaking. And then as you go down towards the mouth, they tend to widen out and get a lot broader and a lot slower. So, you know, compare some of the streams that we have that flow into like the Sammamish River with the Sammamish River itself. And that's a good example of it. Or even North Creek. If you go up to the headwaters of North Creek compared to where North Creek empties into the Sammamish River. Another thing that changes is that you typically have a lot more shading from the riparian zone, which is the area of vegetation around a stream, at the headwaters end than you do at the mouth. So again, that can affect things like, you know, in the Sammamish River, it doesn't have a lot of riparian shading, and so it tends to warm up. So it's actually can form like a thermal barrier to fish passage. Gradient or slope we talked about, and also composition of the bottom. So typically the bottom of the stream when you're closer to the headwaters is more like cobble and, you know, rock, boulders, gravel. And then when you get down towards the bottom of the stream, that's where the silt tends to filter out. So you have more of a like a silty bottom. Another thing that you'll see is typically at the head at the headwaters of a stream, you have more higher clarity in the water, whereas when you get down more towards the mouth, you tend to have more turbidity. Also, the creatures that live in the stream and what they eat. So there's a group of creatures called benthic macroinvertebrates, and we talk about those in our stream biomonitoring class, but you can see in the diagram where it says predators, collectors, shredders, grazers. Those are different types of benthic macroinvertebrates that use different food sources in the stream, and they're more prevalent in different places. So higher up in the watershed, there's more leaf litter that's falling in and is a food source for the collectors and the shredders, and then predators eat others of those. Where you have a little bit further down, you might have more, say, algae growing on the rocks, and that's what the grazers would eat. So you might have more grazers. And then as you get farther down towards the mouth of the river, you might have a higher ratio of, say, collectors to the other types of benthic macroinvertebrates. And those terms are what's called functional feeding groups. And looking at a change in the functional feeding groups is also something that you see in terms of going from the headwaters to the mouth. Okay, we're going to move into talking about land use, water pollution, and stormwater. So this is a photo of a house on Swamp Creek in Kenmore, which has got stormwater issues from time to time. So things that affect water quality and water quantity include like what is the land use in the watershed? So if there's a lot of roads and impervious surfaces, then stormwater, as opposed to being used by the trees, the plants, soaking into the ground, it's going to tend to run off. And so that can have a really bad effect on the water quality. Other things like land clearing, construction and land development can affect water quality. Land use, like agricultural use or golf courses, can introduce a lot of chemicals into the water. Also, recreational use and pets can affect water quality. And in terms of like a variety of pollutants, septic systems and sewer systems can also affect water pollution and stormwater. Water pollution is classified as either point source or non-point source. So point source is pollution that comes from a particular point, like a pipe, and non-point source occurs when things are just generally coming off the landscape and you can't point to a particular spot that they're coming from. Which do you guys think would be more difficult to deal with or control? Typically, go
Your
ahead.
non-point, I imagine.
Yeah. Yeah, typically if you have a point source, you can do some testing and figure out where it's coming from, but it's the non-point which is more difficult to control. So now we're going to talk about sediment and turbidity. So this is essentially a form of water pollution. So turbidity is sediment that's suspended in water, which reduces clarity. And this is an example of Little Swamp Creek in Kenmore. After there was, I noticed high turbidity and traced it back to sediment running off of a construction site. So in terms of land use, E-Man was talking about issuing permits for different activities. And one of the things that construction projects are supposed to do is they're supposed to have a permit that just specifies how they're going to manage their stormwater. And they're also supposed to implement what are called temporary erosion and sedimentation controls to make sure that they contain their sediment on site and it doesn't run off into a stream. This type of pollution, if you discover it, is considered a spill, like an oil spill, and it should be reported to both the State Department of Ecology and local jurisdiction. Nutrients is another term for fertilizers or things that cause plants to grow. So nitrogen and nitrates and phosphates, nitrogen and phosphorus come mostly from fertilizer. And again, those come from lawns, golf courses, and agricultural use. And the big adverse effect of these is that they can contribute to algae blooms as well as just abnormal plant growth. Another key type of water pollution issue that we're concerned about is runoff from impervious surfaces. So some people are not aware that storm drains on streets actually drain into streams. And so all that stuff that washes off the roads can drain into streams. And in fact, it's been linked to now there's a particular chemical that's been found in tire rubber called PPD6Q, which has been implicated in pre-spawn mortality in salmon. Another thing that we're concerned about with water quality is bacteria and viruses. And these are things that are disease-causing microorganisms that can come from a variety of sources. They can come from human and animal waste, and they can get into streams and lakes via either stormwater, just runoff off the surface, animal use, and also from malfunctioning septic and sewer systems. if people accidentally ingest this water, they can get sick. And so this is why sometimes beaches are closed to swimming when the health department discovers that they've got too high of bacteria levels. And there are actions that people can take to limit this pollution, picking up pet waste, maintaining septic systems, not feeding the ducks. Okay, we're going to shift gears from water pollution to talking about laws and regulations for water quality. So once upon a time, there were no regulations for water quality. So if you go to East Coast in particular, there's a lot of places where there were, say, for instance, textile mills or other things that use the local streams as just a way to dispose of their wastes, their chemical wastes, like their dyes and so on. And around here, for instance, there was a lot of times creeks were straightened and used for maybe logging or agricultural purposes. So it used to be pretty much you could do whatever you wanted to with the stream or river, and there was really not much legal framework to protect them. In 1972, there was at a national level, it was a Clean Water Act of 1972. And that really was kind of the fundamental basis for where water quality regulations came from. At a state level, the Washington Administrative Code has a section that specifies detailed freshwater standards. And then at local levels, there's a variety of regulations that are among the things that they are concerned with. Water quality is one of those things. And specifically, there's some permitting called the NPDES permit that describes it's a stormwater general permit. All cities over a certain size, counties with population over a certain size, private construction projects, and certain other polluters all have to obtain this permit, NPDES permit, and get it approved by the Department of Ecology or whoever is enforcing it on their behalf, that says how they're going to manage their stormwater. So at this point, everybody's supposed to manage their stormwater. A couple other legal acronyms. NEPA is the National Environmental Policy Act, and SEPA is the State Environmental Policy Act. Those come into play where, for instance, if someone's doing a development project, they have to go through a so-called SEPA process where they have to fill out a checklist that specifies if their project is going to cause any environmental harms or not, and if it is, what are they going to do about it? The other thing that's interesting is under the Clean Water Act of 1972, there is a citizen lawsuit provision. So anybody who discovers a water quality issue has a right to demand clean water and can actually file a citizen lawsuit under the Clean Water Act of 1972. So there's legal regulations that cover water pollution. There's also voluntary actions that people can take to curb water pollution. So rain gardens, restoring stream buffers. That was what originally, one of the things that got me connected to streams was that before I was ever connected to Adopt a Stream, they were coming around and seeking streamside landowners who wanted to have a riparian restoration on their property. And so I was one of those streamside landowners that got a restored stream buffer. Other things people can do: pick up pet waste, maintain their vehicles, and avoid chemicals. Also minimizing runoff through things like green roofs and porous pavement, and limiting chemicals. Now, talking about who monitors water and why. So state and federal agencies monitor it for regulatory purposes. So a lot of times, as I mentioned, people might have to get an NPDES permit. They might have to, and they might be subject to monitoring. Another case where a state, federal, or local agency would monitor would be if you discover that a water body's got pollution, they might have to implement, if it's listed under EPA section 303D as impaired, then they can be, whoever's jurisdiction is in charge of that water body may be required to create a water quality improvement plan and then do monitoring. So a case in point would be Swamp Creek has a water quality improvement plan for bacteria levels because it's been listed as an impaired water body from a bacteria standpoint. So jurisdictions on Swamp Creek have to do regular water quality monitoring for bacteria levels to see if the improvement plan is resulting in improvements in water quality. So others who monitor might be, for instance, nonprofits like Whale Scout or Sno-King Watershed Council, and we would monitor for educational purposes, to raise awareness, to conduct a study about the impact of a riparian restoration, and also just to have more eyes on the stream so that the agencies that don't have the staffing to do all the enforcement that they would like to do, they kind of rely on individuals to recognize water pollution and report it. So water monitoring is essentially just regular systematic assessment. Some of the things that we look at include temperature, dissolved oxygen, some other chemical analyses, bacteria, things that live in the stream. And it is done to help us understand what's happening in the stream and what's changing over time.
Eric, can I ask a question real quick?
Yeah.
I had a question about what you mentioned in the last slide about like if a body of water is kind of like a health hazard,
Mhm.
that they should have a like implementation plan in order to kind of mitigate that.
Mhm.
And that's you said that's always true.
It's not always true, but it is typically the case. So I'll describe how the process works. So if somebody submits documentation to the Department of Ecology, who implements this EPA regulation that says, I think this water quality, or this water body is polluted because of, and there could be like, some of the categories would be high temperature or low dissolved oxygen or high levels of bacteria or whatever it is. They've submitted data in a methodology that ecology approves of that says, we found that this water body is polluted. Then ecology goes, okay, we're going to list that on 303, section 303D. So if you actually search out 303D listing North Creek or 303D listing Sammamish River, you'll see, you can find what sort of things that those water bodies are listed for. And so then the jurisdiction, like the city of Bothell, will have a water quality improvement plan. They're typically required to put in place a water quality improvement plan. And part of that plan, it establishes what are called total maximum daily levels, or TMDLs, which is they don't want to find a level higher than that level. So a good resource for this in Bothell, since you guys are all in Bothell, actually, is Amanda Royal at the city of Bothell. She's a surface water coordinator, and she could talk more about or share information about Bothell's water quality improvement plan for different variables. But that's essentially the process. Is someone identifies that there's a pollutant, that the water body is polluted, they document it, ecology adds it to the list, and then the jurisdiction is required to create a water quality improvement plan and follow that up with monitoring and actions to improve that water quality.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I was just curious too, because I was mostly thinking about I went to Gasworks Park for like a beach cleanup like a month or so ago. and you like technically can't even go in that water because it's so polluted. I don't know if it's just because like it has like leftover like petroleum or something from when the factory was functioning, but I was just curious if like there even is like a process to improve that or mitigate that or whatever. So, but that would be interesting to look into more. So,
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah. 303 listing for Lake Union. Yeah, I would hope there's some sort of plan to
yeah.
improve the water quality of Lake Union.
hmm
So the key questions that we are trying to answer in water quality and water monitoring are, for our purposes, is it good for fish and wildlife? Is it safe for drinking, swimming, or wading? And is it getting better or worse, and why? So when we look at the health of a stream, we want to look at the stream as a whole, not just one particular factor. So you can isolate individual different variables you're looking at. Like we could just look at physical and chemical variables. Those don't necessarily tell the whole story, though. You might find, like, say, for instance, the temperature might be okay, dissolved oxygen might be okay, but maybe bacteria is a problem, or maybe there's inadequate riparian zone, there's no shading around the stream, or maybe it doesn't have a good community of benthic macroinvertebrates. So you kind of have to look at the stream system as a whole and what is going on in relation between it and the surrounding environment. Another thing to consider is, like, how does it respond to storm inputs? So sometimes they refer to a stream as being flashy, which means that essentially it rises quickly when it rains, and then when it quits raining, it drops quickly. And you'd find that is more the case in a built-up area that's got more impervious surface, because it all just runs off faster, comes up faster, and then because you haven't had that water recharge, when it quits raining, it dries up faster. All right, getting into the steps of water monitoring. So first thing is you want to define why do you want to do it, what do you want to do, how are you going to do it, where and when. You want to get information about the watershed. You want to become familiar with the length of the stream and what's going on. You might want to identify some key areas where maybe there's some activity or something that you're concerned about, or maybe there's some restoration work that you want to highlight, is that having a beneficial effect? And then within those key areas, you want to identify specific sites that you're concerned about. So where are some places that you would like to monitor or that you can monitor? And then start collecting some data. And then once you've been collecting data, use that data for one of the different methods that you can use to improve the water quality. In the Streamkeeper's Field Guide, there's a section on how to become a streamkeeper that talks about this, the steps of how you go about this. So an important thing when you're doing water quality monitoring is you want to make sure that you generate data that's credible. And so when you're doing water quality monitoring, another key concept is a thing called a Quality Assurance Project Plan, or a QAP. And this is something that you might do for a program. Like, we operate under a QAP that was created by Global Water Watch. But another case would be like Adopt a Stream is doing a project on North Creek to implement things called beaver dam analogs, which are essentially artificial beaver dams to try to retain more water on the landscape. And so as part of that project, we had to develop a QUAP that says, okay, how are we going to evaluate the water quality impacts before and after we do this project? So those are kind of the components of a quality assurance plan and to ensure that you're generating credible data. In terms of site selection, we have an acronym called CLASS. So you want to find a site that's convenient. So it's not like say too far away, difficult. It's legal, so you actually have permission to do the water monitoring there. It's accessible, so you can actually get to it, because there's some places that, for instance, there was a intern, or I'm not sure what Esme's role was within Whale Scout, but there was a student associated with Whale Scout who did a water quality study on the Sammamish River. But one of the issues was accessibility, like where can you actually access the water to test it, because there's so much blackberries growing on the banks. You want to choose a site that's safe. So one of the things we recommend is that people do this with a partner, but also you just want to consider your personal safety when you're going to pick a site. And then finally, strategic. So figure out, how does this particular site fit into the overall goal of what you're monitoring? There's different ways that you can put your data to use. So you can use it for raising awareness, like maybe people are unaware that they might have an impact on a water body, or you can use it for education, just training people about these concepts, or you can use it for getting action on an issue. So this is an example of a chart from our Global Water Watch database where we were monitoring bacteria levels on Little Swamp Creek by the headwaters. And what we discovered was typically we were finding really high bacteria levels on this headwaters area of Little Swamp Creek. We used this data to reach out to the city of Bothell and get them to investigate what was going on with Little Swamp Creek. And they didn't find 100% a smoking gun, but they did find some historic use that had left behind some like kind of a sewage lagoon from a former kind of agricultural use that might have been contributing to these high levels. So as that area was redeveloped, this problem seems to have gone away. Also further downstream, we had the same issue of bacteria in Little Swamp Creek, and often we're concerned about development having an adverse effect on water quality, but there was a old shopping center called Country Village on it that Little Swamp Creek flowed through, and it had a duck pond, which was a big contributor of bacteria. So when they redeveloped, they actually restored the stream channel, got rid of the duck pond, and the bacteria got better. This is another case of data action strategy. So this was a group of high school students in the city of Snohomish, and they were part of a club. And what they did was they implemented a water quality monitoring program on a lake called Blackman's Lake, and found that they had high bacteria levels in the lake. So they implemented the water quality monitoring program, and then they facilitated a public meeting to generate a discussion about water quality in Blackman's Lake. So that was a well-attended public meeting that is another way that you could take the data that you're finding and get some results out of it. Another example of what you can do is, I mentioned previously that I've discovered instances of high turbidity in the creek that I live on, and that's not normal for it. So it's pretty easy for me, having walked the stream many times, when I find that there's a high turbidity event, I can usually walk upstream and I know places where I can observe it and go, okay, looks turbid. Oh, it's clear starting at this point. Okay, what's contributing to the turbidity at that point. And so what I found on typically when this has occurred, it's usually been related to construction activity. But actually recently we had an instance of this that didn't last very long. We walked upstream and it was because just upstream of me, there's a gigantic beaver dam on a big piece of property. And Beavers Northwest is an organization that's helping the city of Kenmore manage the beaver impacts without hopefully adversely affecting the beavers. And they actually had notched a beaver dam to let some water out, and that was causing high turbidity. So, but this is just a case in point where the observational data you can collect, you can then investigate what's going on. And then this case that I've got pictured here was it was traced to a development construction project. And so I reported it and got action from the Department of Ecology and the city of Bothell, which actually put a stop work on a project until they had their temporary erosion and sedimentation controls in place. Okay, becoming a stream keeper. So first of all, is there a stream or watershed that you're concerned with or want to know more about? Are there partners that you can work with who want to help you, allies that want to work with you on your water quality goals? What kind of monitoring do you want to do? So think about, do you want to do physical, chemical, bacteria, stream biomonitoring, all the above, habitat, what are the things that you want to monitor? We offer one set of training classes, and you can also go through the Streamkeeper's Field Guide. So go ahead and do some training, learn more about your watershed, and then you can start water monitoring. And then once you educate yourself, then you can start educating others about local water quality issues and why they're important. So thank you very much for your attention. And I will stop the recording and then see if anybody has any questions.
No questions from me so far. Thank you.